JD Kane here, VP of Sales for Revinate. Welcome to a video series where we preview the amazing content in our latest hotel marketing benchmark report. We analyzed over 368 million emails across our entire global customer base to pull out benchmarks and insights for you. You can always download the report by going to revinate.com and looking under the Learn menu. Now, let's take a look at each of these 9 sections in detail. I'd like to introduce Karen Stevens, Chief Revenue Officer for Revinate. Thanks for joining me, Karen.
Happy to be here, JD.
2020, hell of a year.
Hell of a year.
We're going to preview the section 2020 year in review. Karen, please describe what you found most interesting in the year in review section.
Well, I'll tell you what, as you said, 2020, what a year. Have never seen anything like it globally and very specifically within hospitality. So I think when I look at this report and I think about the metrics we have in here, it's really a combination of 2 things. So obviously we have a lot of customers and we're pulling a lot of that data to glean out a lot of insights about how the year went. But for me, the highlight was really a survey that we conducted among travelers. So early on in the pandemic, we conducted a survey through Google to 10,000 travelers in a bunch of different markets and pulled out some interesting stats just to help our customers kind of understand if the market is shrinking or the demand is shrinking, where can you find demand? So one of the stats that really stands out to me is that across those 10,000 travelers, nearly 73% said that they had some intention of traveling over the next 12 months. But the key is really how that demand changed, right? So they're going to travel, but definitely what we saw was that it wasn't the travel that they might have done in the past.
And I'm lucky enough to be one of those 72, 73% that was able to travel to drive destinations in particular, all Revinate customers. And it's great to see how after now they're using the data that I had from my booking and from surveys I completed to retarget me.
Absolutely. So that's really the key. I think, one of the things that customers love most about our product is our speed to market. In other words, it's very simple to go in, run a quick segment, and that could be by booking window, by city location, by what you've booked in the past in terms of ADR. So that's always been a very key feature of the product. But when you're talking about a pandemic and you need to quickly find out who is within a 2-hour drive of my destination and who booked the suite and who has a family, then you can really start to target those folks. And really the customers that were able to do that and respond quickly actually put revenue on the books, even during the darkest days of the pandemic, April and May. So I'm glad to hear that you benefited from some of that as well, JD.
Exactly. And as we look to the recovery that's now upon us, what would you say are some of the things that people are doing to maximize the potential to get ahead of that inevitable return?
Right. Well, I think, obviously different markets are opening at different speeds, but at least in the Americas, what we're seeing is a huge demand. So the demand is there. Revenge travel is real. I think the question now for hoteliers is, what channel are you going to put that business on, right? Because obviously bringing customers back through your direct channel is going to be the most profitable for you. So how do you find those customers that loved your hotel in the past, understanding what kind of room types they booked? Are they in suites? What kind of things do they love about your property, whether that's golf or spa or whatever it might be, and making sure that you get to them first, right? So that they're not coming in on other channels that are more expensive, like the OTAs, but you're getting most of that demand through your direct channels. So I think that is absolutely the most exciting part. The demand is there. Now the question is, can you get it at the right price and also at the right margin, meaning you're not paying a huge margin on that piece of business that would have come to you anyway.
Exactly. Establishing who your loyal guests are and hitting them with the offers that are most relevant for them, because it's not all about discounting. These people have shown their propensity to come even at the best rate.
Yes. And, you definitely don't want to pay, I think OTAs is a great way to get new business, incremental business, but I promise you that all of your repeat customers are also, everybody's looking for a place to take a vacation. So make sure you're reaching out to those people who already know your property, already love you, and get them in the door. And that's something we also saw during the pandemic as well. With customers that were going to travel, they said right out, I want to go to a place I already know because I know the cleaning standards, I'm familiar with the property, I love the staff, whatever it might be, but the familiar was very important, and that was obvious in the survey that we conducted.
That's right. And I do have my kids asking to go back to those places again right now. So I think we will be repeat guests.
Yes, that's great.
All right. Well, thank you, Karen, for joining. Appreciate your thoughts on the 2020 year in review.
You got it.
I'm here with Delana Meyer, a savvy industry veteran in hospitality, marketing, and operations. Delana helps hotels optimize operations and generate revenue across all channels. Welcome, Delana.
Hello, JD. Thanks for having me.
Sure. We are going to preview the section on global hotel database size. So, Delana, please describe what you found most interesting about the section on hotel database size.
So I think the most interesting thing that I found was just the overall volume of the database itself. It seems like it would have been lower because of GDPR and the California laws and the different privacy things that have come out over the last couple of years, but it's actually a pretty healthy size. I was also surprised that Scandinavia had a 57%, 50,000 plus database. It seems like a lot for such a small hotels. Wasn't very surprised about Europe and the UK since there are a lot of small hotels there, but Africa also surprised me a little bit. Seems like a lot of small properties to have such a big database.
Exactly. Yeah, I 100% agree. Seeing 31% globally have over 50,000 users in the database shows it's a true data asset that hotels can be using to drive those direct bookings. And it's great to see that even despite all these compliancy laws that have been passed, people are still doing well to grow their database. So one follow-up question I had for you is, what would you recommend are best practices on growing the hotel database size?
Well, I think there's obvious ones that you mentioned in your report as well, but collecting internet in the room, in the public spaces, website collection is a no-brainer. You need it in your footer, and then also maybe using pop-ups, which can be very effective as long as you don't overdo it and you put some of those restrictions around so you're not getting it over and over and over again, because that can be annoying. And then I think you can also, there's great opportunities within your advertising to collect emails. Front desk can also be an advocate. I think in a lot of the hotels I work with, it seems the front desk really struggles to do that. So we always try to put something in place for the front desk to double check the database and add those emails when they're appropriate. So
excellent. Well, thank you. Great tips from Delana on how to grow your hotel database size. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
All right. I'd like to introduce Cara Federici, CEO of the Madison Mel Agency and Tech Theory Group. The Madison Mel Agency is a creative studio and lifestyle consultancy specializing in creative branding, marketing, and design for the hospitality industry. And the Tech Theory Group, close partner of Madison Mel, is a group that focuses on managed IT solutions and infrastructure services for hotels. I should also mention that Cara is a great partner of Revinate, as we have many mutual customers. Welcome, Cara.
Thanks, JD. Thanks for having me.
We are going to preview the section on campaign performance. So, Cara, please describe for me what is most interesting to you about the campaign performance section.
Yeah, well, first of all, the whole benchmark report is really intriguing and very helpful for all of us marketers out there to understand trends and how they've changed over the past year. But to me, what stood out the most was the conversion rate section, specifically because as we deploy campaigns for all of our clientele, the one thing we always focus on is conversion, which means, driving revenue and actually getting hotel bookings to come through from the campaigns. And what I thought was most interesting about that, even more specifically, was that the smaller the segment, the higher the conversion rate. And I think that that is definitely something that's important to consider when you're creating your campaigns, because of course you want to look at the type of messaging that you're doing, but as well as the frequency, but more so who you're targeting and what is really important to them. And clearly, when you have a more targeted segment, you get a better result. So that was really interesting to see. And kind of not counterintuitive, but definitely shocking that, because you would think, oh, maybe the more people that you message to, the higher your conversion rate is, right? But the reality is it's the opposite of that.
Right. Yeah. Looking down here, looking at those stats on the conversion rates. Yeah, over 50,000, 0.04%, and under 5K, 0.21. So just a real stark comparison there, speaking to how it's really all about relevancy. I mean, we're all unique people with unique interests, and I think it's all about the hotels being able to speak to that relevance. So how would you say hotels can do a better job of seeing you as this unique person that needs to be spoken to individually?
Yeah, I definitely think the first thing that we look at and we definitely recommend is looking at your segmentation and understanding that every email campaign that you put together doesn't necessarily need to go to every single person in your database. And so look at their spend, look at, when they stayed last time, look at the different variations of their demographics and understand what your business needs most importantly and most, prominently, and then create a message that targets just a particular segment of your database with a particular offer or with a message that they're going to be interested in reading. And rather than sending it to, everybody and some people feeling like it's just noise in another email in their inbox, really target toward that particular customer's needs, wants, desires, past history, and spend, so that they'll be really inclined to open it and read what you're saying and actually take action on the campaign and book and come back to stay with you.
Wow. Thank you for that conversion blueprint from the expert. Sarah, thank you for joining us today. And once again, CEO of Madison Mail Agency and Tech Theory Group, thanks for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks.
I'd like to introduce Dan Waxman, principal at Sasado, a consultancy focused on hotel technology, marketing, and distribution. Thanks for joining me, Dan.
My pleasure.
Dan and I are going to preview the section on one-time promotions. So Dan, please tell me what you found most interesting about the section on one-time promotions.
Sure. First off, great report, really interesting stuff in there. And I really found myself drawn into the one-time promotion piece of it, because it talked a lot about the open rates and the effectiveness of those one-time promotions. And, one of the things that struck me was how low the promotion open rate actually was, at 15%. And I think, compared to some of the other types of email promotions, it's much lower. And you sort of have to ask yourself, why is it so low? In my mind, the promotions are potentially the most exciting and the most relevant campaign that you could be running. So in theory, really, it should have the highest open rates and not the lowest open rates. And, so why is this? And in my mind, I think there are probably two reasons for it. One is when hotels do promotions, they tend to blast it out to their entire database as opposed to making it much more targeted. And I think when you blast out why, not only do you risk people opting out, you're also going to have a low open rate and a low click-through rate. So that's one aspect of it. Another aspect, I think, is the content. To be, frank, a lot of the hotel promo content is crap. Right? Everything from the subject line to the actual content to the offer, it's all sort of ho-hum, right? It's same thing over and over again. I always have to laugh when I see these sort of recycled promo campaigns and with subject lines like spring into summer. Wow, that's very clever and that's unusual, right? Or sweet deals, right? With it cleverly misspelled like a sweet instead of sweet. Like that hasn't been used to death. And I think, people see that I don't even know if they take the time to roll their eyes, but they just delete it, and I think email marketers have to be more clever than this, right? You need to have compelling content when you're sending out these emails to get people to open it. So, if I broke it down into a few areas, it's number one, targeting. Make sure that it's clearly targeted. Creating compelling content, and I think sometimes people underestimate the importance of the subject lines. I mean, it's just so important. It's what's going to get the open and hopefully get people to look at the content and then eventually click through. And then, of course, creating compelling offers. The offers have to be good to get people to go through, but you sort of have to make it through those things first, right? You have to make it through the gatekeepers. And I think you do that by targeting, creating compelling content, and especially subject lines. And I think you see, if you look at that 15% rate, and when I was looking at the data, it was really interesting to me to see that sort of Europe does a lot better in promotions than the US. And I think one of the reasons is they tend to be more targeted, right? Their user base, and I think this is 2019 data, so it's not COVID impacted, or is this COVID impacted?
Yeah, this is COVID impacted.
Okay, it's COVID impacted, which is even more, right? So they're hyper targeted, right? Not a lot of people are going to be able to come to their properties, except people who are in certain areas and certain types of people. And I think they're able to send out really specific messages, while we may be sending out in North America promo messages that are sort of generic and meant to capture everybody. But at the end of the day, you're capturing no one.
Exactly. A lot of good advice in there, Dan. So as the recovery is imminent and you want to give advice to hotels on what they should be doing with their offers to stand out from their competitors, what would you say to them?
Well, I think similar to the point I was trying to make, I think is that, it's less about the offer. I think the offers are extremely important, but it's more about getting through the gatekeepers, and that's all about messaging, right? And you have to make sure that you have the right message there that will get them to the offer, right? And the offer has to be good. But I think what we're seeing now is, right, a whole different environment with all this pent up demand, and people wanting to travel, people wanting to get out, people wanting to have fun and be safe at the same time. So I think the question that email marketers need to ask themselves is, how do you message this, right? How do you message you can come to our property, you can have fun, you can be safe, and this is going to be enjoyable? And how can you do it in a fun way as well that's going to get them to look at your subject line and think, hey, that's interesting, let me open it. Then you have the content and say, wow, that looked cool. They have a bar that's socially distanced, but looks like a lot of fun, where they have live music or whatever it is that you're able to do to have that compelling content. Plus you have this offer there as well. And again, I think one of the things I want to discourage people, same thing we said 6 months ago when we said you're not going to create demand by lowering your rates. I think now you have the demand, and I don't think people are that sensitive to that now. They're more sensitive to the experience. So I think it's about messaging. I think it's making sure you have the right message. And when we talk about email, again, it's not rocket science, right? It's about a subject line that gets people to open it, and then content in there that gets people excited and get them to click through and ultimately, hopefully, convert.
100% agree that the demand's going to be there. It's not about rate right now, and the right appropriate offer speaking to people and their interests, and perhaps giving them something familiar that they've been there before, is what's going to get them to come back now. So thanks a lot. I appreciate your thoughts, Dan.
My pleasure. Great talking to you again, JD.
I'd like to introduce Brandon Ahern, Director of Sales for 829 Studios, a vertically integrated agency specializing in the travel industry. Thanks for joining me, Brandon.
JD, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So Brandon and I are previewing the section on automated campaigns. Brandon, please describe what is most interesting to you about the automated campaign section.
Yeah, so the power of Revinate and where it really resonated for me was where you have the ability to segment and customize with plugging directly into the PMS. And I think the power there comes competing against platforms like MailChimp that don't have that capability and don't have the power to be able to segment as deeply as Revinate can due to plugging in directly to the PMS and having insight into the brains of the hotel.
Exactly. Yeah. Looking here, they open higher, they click through higher, and of course they convert higher. Um, so they convert higher, run automatically, relieving the staff at the marketing staff at the hotel, freeing them up for other things. Um, what explain to me what you think the hesitation is for some hoteliers to move to something that is an automated system over something like MailChimp and Constant Contact?
Yeah, great question. So I think a lot of the times when we have conversations with hotels that are looking at different platforms, cost can be a concern. The repetitiveness of being used to a platform can be a concern. I think where Revinate alleviates all of those concerns that come up with a lot of hoteliers is the fact that it's cost effective. You're seeing immediate ROI. You can see in the charts here that the lift and the power of the platform far exceeds its competitors. And I think there are a lot of tools the hoteliers can tap into at the initiation of the partnership, where Revinate is super user friendly. It's not complex when you're in there and digging around. You have the ability to go into a sandbox environment, see what it looks like, see how to play around with it. And the platform is really user friendly. So you don't have the issue of having to worry about being used to a certain platform and then transitioning to this new platform that's going to be complex. Very user friendly, easy to see the results. The ROI you'll see pays for itself.
Excellent. Well, thanks for that insight, Brandon. Really appreciate joining me. That's Brandon Ahern from 829 Studios. Thank you.
JD, thanks for having me.
I'd like to introduce Mark Oliver, VP of Business Development at G-Commerce, and G-Commerce happens to be a preferred partner of Revinate as the majority of their customers are using Revinate. Thanks for joining me, Mark.
Thanks for having me, JD.
So Mark and I are previewing the section on segmentation. Mark, tell me about what you found interesting in the research about segmentation.
Well, right now it's more important than ever to segment your database. We've seen with the recent pandemic, your market's changed. So you need to segment by zip code. You need to segment by stay dates, anniversaries, birthdays, even going as far as we told our customers to look at where people are flying in from. You got to look at your local airports, where people are flying in from, and really kind of segment and talk to each one of those segments separately. And as you can see in the report here, you've got a 400, almost over 400% increase when you segment your campaigns. I think the best way to describe it, even more so, is look at the retail market. They're pros at it. They segment their databases and they talk to you based upon what you've purchased. So hoteliers definitely need to do this. The numbers right there show what can happen when you start segmenting your email marketing database. You don't want to talk to them as one big group, because that's not what they are.
Exactly. The ramifications are quite broad. What are some of the things you're seeing smart hoteliers do to stay ahead of the game with segmentation?
That's a great question. With the cookieless world coming up here, Google's going to start ramping that up here in 2022. Firefox has already done it. Facebook is coming on. Apple's already done it. So with the cookieless world, it's even more important now, and even before now, and definitely down the line, to have a robust ECRM in place, and two, to gather as many first data emails as you possibly can, and then, as you see right here, segment them, because your first party database is going to be so important moving into 2022. You've got to build that up right now, but then you've got to speak to them separately. We like to say one-to-one. I don't think we're ever going to get to one-to-one, but if you can break it down again by zip codes, stay dates, anniversaries, different segments, that's going to help you tremendously. And down in the report within campaign segmentation, you can see as the smaller you can get those segments, the more defined they are, the higher return you're going to have on it. So that's something to be very cognizant of, is looking down the line, building up your first party database, because of the cookieless world. Third-party cookies are going away, and then email to those people directly in a smart, efficient way.
Couldn't agree more. Cookieless world is definitely going to make a huge impact, and first-party data, getting to that one-to-one promise. Challenge accepted. We'll get there. Thanks a lot. I appreciate your thoughts, Mark.
Thank you, JD.
I'm now joined by Nick Ferris, Major Account Executive for Revinate. Thanks for joining, Nick.
Hey, JD. Thanks for having me.
Nick and I are going to preview the section on email volume. Nick, describe for me what was most interesting for you about this section.
So I thought it was super interesting to see that there was a 40% increase in review volume in 2020, right in the middle of COVID, versus the previous year. Not something I would have expected. And I think, as it turns out, we saw that COVID was, for a lot of folks, it was a forcing mechanism, to get much more efficient with fewer resources, fewer dollars. And so people shifted a lot of their efforts to email and targeting past guests to come back, which, really, if you think about it, that is a hotel's lowest cost direct distribution channel.
Absolutely. Certainly, organizationally, just like hotels, Revinate trying to do more with less. That was really a mandate as this pandemic went on. Across your customer base, do you have any examples of customers you thought did well with this?
Yeah, there's a lot of cool groups out there that I think adapted really, we're very quick to. Like Noble House comes to mind. Ace Hotels, another great group. Like Noble House, they got very specific with segmentation, particularly as restrictions started changing around the world. So for example, in Canada, they used a lot of location data to only target guests who could actually stay, at the hotel, given all the restrictions that were placed in Canada. And that gave them a big edge versus other hotels in their market. There are other, Noble House properties that, did the same type of strategy. They were targeting specific states that were close by or less restrictive in shutdowns and easier for guests to get to. I think on the flip side, think of someone like Ace, for example. I mean, they've always had a very creative way to stay top of mind and promote their brand. They even actually grew their database during COVID. The anomaly, wouldn't have guessed that in a million years. And so, during closures, what they were doing is they were selling online shop items with email promotions. They were partnering with other businesses to highlight each other, things like that. And then as soon as things, started opening again, in different pockets, they used email to promote special rates, like day stays, or even work from hotel, extended stay offers, just in general, being really creative about, how they can communicate with less.
Exactly. And it's that agility, that real-time nature of needing to update the customer base on things going on, restrictions being lifted and whatnot, and certain directions on what's going on in and around the hotel and what they're going to experience when they come. That really led to higher volume, and also getting clever with how they were advertising and marketing certain things. So excellent examples. Thanks for sharing that with us, Nick. Appreciate your thoughts on email volume.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm joined by Vishal Shea, Major Account Executive for Revinate. Welcome, Vishal.
JD, how you doing? It's good to be here.
Doing great, Vishal. Thanks for joining. Vishal and I are going to be previewing the section on revenue upsells. Vishal, describe for me what you found most interesting about the revenue upsell data.
Yeah, I think there's a lot there. What was the most intriguing and exciting that I saw was how important for our customers it was for upsells, ranging from rooms to amenities. Looked like 75% of our customers really took advantage of rooms last year, which was great to see. But at the same time, amenities were 25%, and a lot of hoteliers think that rooms really take a lot more than amenities, but 25% in general of amenities, there's a lot of strong ancillary revenue there.
Absolutely. With bookings really falling off a cliff, it was important for the ones that did show up to maximize that revenue and really drive the spend per stay as much as possible through upsells. Looking across your customers, do you have any examples of folks you thought did really well during COVID?
Yeah, a great group out of North Carolina called Old Edwards Hospitality Group. What was interesting about them is they're using our platform to power any sort of amenity upsells they can, because with amenity upsells, you can be so much more crafty and creative and you're not limited to rooms. So what they're doing is they're doing like a bottle of champagne, they're doing a glass of wine before check-in, milk and cookies, a box of chocolates, a bouquet of roses. And I think they're crushing it because what they're doing is they're seeing how well amenities perform from a month-to-month basis, and when they can do that with Revinate, they can actually increase the price on specific amenities that are doing really, really well, and they're crushing it. It's great to see.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great that they look like they really experimented with it, found some things that worked and did more of that. Well, there you have it. Some great advice from Old Edwards Group and Vishal Shea. Thank you.
Pleasure, guys. Take care.
I'd like to introduce John Saldat, Major Account Executive for Revinate. Thanks for joining me, John.
Yeah, pleasure, JD. Good to see you.
John and I are previewing the section on email clients and devices. John, what did you find most surprising about the research on email clients and devices?
Yeah, great question, JD. Given the year that has been with COVID, I was expecting that a higher percentage of people would go back to viewing emails that were sent on desktops, laptops, etc., in spite of the trend in prior years, seeing a higher percentage being viewed on mobile devices like phones. Absolutely not the case. And we discovered that the trend, although not quite as big a jump, continued, so that phones were still at the top.
Yep, and you can see that right here on this graph. So tell me what you think that means for marketers as they're preparing their campaigns.
Well, it just really emphasizes, JD, how critical it is that marketers need to make sure every single device has a perfect viewing capability for the audience. Doesn't matter whether they're receiving it on a phone initially, perhaps a desktop later, but they really have to make sure that every single device and every single method is perfect. And it really brought home to me how critical it is and how much of an advantage Revinate provides for our customers and potential customers, because we give them the ability to see before they send what it's going to look like on every single type of device. Absolutely a game changer.
Agreed. Yeah, the ability to render it on 28 different platforms right inside the Revinate application certainly makes that easy. And to see a demo of that, please go to revinate.com and ask for a demo. Great. Thanks for that insight, John. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you're very welcome, JD. All the best.
2020 was a year unlike any other, and it changed everything about the way we should be benchmarking ourselves. This guide has the data that you can use against which you measure your performance. For all the data, please go to revinate.com and download the full guide under the Learn menu. There you'll also find other great research content, such as our traveler study for what the world looks like post-COVID, our guide on what you should be doing to build your marketing strategies throughout the recovery. And finally, an email guide written by Revinate's experts on the insights, strategies, and best practices to be using for email marketing in general. Thank you.